Hello and welcome to Ph06.2.2 Lessons. Today, Heart Edition. We are going to be talking about the heart, which is a muscle pump that's going to be moving blood around our body. Okay, the heart actually has this shape. People draw it like this, and usually get asked why the heart looks like this. If it actually it's something a little bit more like that, or actually the heart is something like this. So what this here has to do with this over here, and actually you're going to see that this representation here is not very far away from a very simple diagrammatic representation of what the heart would be. Today you're going to be learning the parts of the heart and more or less how they're going to be working, how they do their job, which is to move blood around. So an open heart, that one in the middle, it looks like this. It's very different from this image that we have over here, but actually if we think on a heart and if we make it as a diagram, you're going to see that there will be some similarities, and that this version here, this one over here, is actually acceptable. First of all, the heart is divided in two sides. You have the right side and the left side. Remembering that the right side is the right of the paper, the right of the one that's laying on the table. So this is one is the right, this one is the one in the left. So this one is going to be the right, this one is going to be the left side. So the heart is divided in two. And actually, then it's going to be divided in two again over here. You have the top part and the bottom part. As you can see here, you have top parts and you have the bottom parts, the same as we have in here, top parts and bottom parts over there. So this here is a way of representing. And then I'm putting here the blood vessels. So this here basically is going to be representing the blood vessel. This one is this here. Actually, this one and this one, they are two, but we represent in our diagram as one over here when they both together get it there into the atrium. This one over here is going to be that one over there. And this one over here is this one over there. And this guy over here is all those there and those here that are getting together into there. So basically the heart is like this. And it's actually not very different from this. As you can see here, let me change the color. We are going to have here one chamber over here. We have another chamber over there. We have another chamber over here. We have one on the top of there over here, and then we have another one over there. Over here we have blood vessels, which is this here and that one over there. We have this here, which is this one over there. We have this here getting in, which are those over there, and we have this guy getting out, which is this one over here. So actually the heart is quite similar to the typical drawing of the heart. We can use this. One thing that maybe you have noticed is that I draw this wall here as being thicker than the other one on the other side. So because this chamber here, this guy over here, has a thicker wall than that one over there. So the left side of the heart is stronger than the right side of the heart. Okay, let's put names on this stuff now so you can know how to call things. So first thing, this chamber on the left, remember, no, the left side of the heart is the one on the paper, you're looking to someone layer on the paper. The left one in the bottom, the strong chamber, is the left ventricle. And of course, the other side is going to be the right ventricle. So the ventricles are the big chambers and strong chambers of the heart. The top chambers are called atrium. It's the entrance to the main chamber, to the entrance to the ventricle. And you have the left atrium, atria, and the right atrium. Both of them are called atria. So you have the four chambers of the heart. This here is true for mammals and for birds. Birds and mammals have four-chambered hearts. Okay, that blood vessel over there is called vena cava. Is the vein that gets blood from all over the body apart from the lungs. The lungs have a different circulation, but all over the body, the blood that's coming from the body, from your head, from your arms, from everywhere, is going to get into the vena cava. Okay, and the blood coming from your lungs, they get into the pulmonary vein. Veins, by the way, they take blood in the direction of the heart. So this here, the vena cava, the blood gets into there. The pulmonary vein, the blood gets into there, coming from the lung. Pulmonary, pulmão, they come from the lungs. Okay. That one over there is a pulmonary artery. The blood, after coming from the vena cava, it gets to the ventricle and it passes over there and gets out. Arteries take blood away from the heart. So you have a pulmonary artery which takes blood to the heart. And of course, after the blood getting to the left ventricle over here, it is pumped all the way to the body through the aorta artery. It's the biggest artery in the human body that takes blood to your arms, to your head, to your thorax, to your liver, to your intestines, to your legs, everywhere. So this is the aorta over there. Okay. We have some valves. This valve here is called tricuspid valve because it has three flaps. It's the valve that separates the atria from the ventricle, the right atrium from the right ventricle. And the valves, they prevent blood from flowing back. Okay, and you have the tricuspis on the right side, and you have the bicuspis because it has two flaps, also known as mitral valve, on the left side. So these are atrioventricular valves, and they are the ones that prevent the blood from flowing from the ventricle to the atria in the moment of the contraction of the ventricles. Okay, those over there are called semilunar valves. They are valves in the beginning of the two heart arteries. Arteries usually don't have valves, but those two they have because they are in the heart. So they start there in the heart, they have these little valves. The semilunar valves are the valves in the beginning of the pulmonary artery in the aorta artery. They are going to make the blood that was just pumped by the ventricle into these arteries to flow back when the ventricles relax and are filled back with blood coming from vena cava and pulmonary vein. So this here is the structure, and we have a few more things over here. The division between the two sides is called septum. Every division, like the septum in your nose, is called septum. And you have the wall of the heart, the muscle of the heart, is called myocardium. Myo means muscle, and cardium, of course, is the heart. So myocardium, the muscle of the heart. This here is the structure of the heart, and it will be good if you learn how to draw them, or at least to identify these parts into a diagram. And now let's take a look on how the heart works. Okay, blood comes from upper and lower body to the vena cava, actually vena cavas, because in the real heart you have a superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. In this diagram we represent this as vena cava to make it simple. The blood gets to the right atrium. The right atrium then pumps it into the right ventricle. And when the right ventricle pumps, it closes the tricuspid valve and prevents the blood from flowing back to the atrium. In that way, the blood has only one way to go, which is to the pulmonary artery. And then in the pulmonary artery, it flows to the lungs, the blood is oxygenated, and it turns from a very dark Bordeaux, very dark red color into a bright red. In diagrams, usually represent this deoxygenated blood, the blood that's coming from the body, in blue, and then after the lungs, we represent it in red because it's a bright red. So the blood from the lungs that have been oxygenated comes back through the pulmonary veins into the left atrium, and then it's pumped into the left ventricle, that when it contracts, it closes the mitral or the bicuspid valve and makes the blood to flow through the aorta. And through the aorta, it moves through the semilunar valves and goes to the upper and the lower body all over the place. So this here is the flow of blood around your heart. If you take a look on the real diagram, it will be more or less the same. It's like this: vena cava getting into the right atrium, the right atrium pumping through the tricuspid valve through to the right ventricle. When it's pumped, it pumps to the pulmonary arteries that separate through the right and left lungs, and then the blood comes back oxygenated in red through the pulmonary vein into the the left atrium, and then it's pumped through the mitral or bicuspid valve into the left ventricle, and then it's pumped through the aorta, where it goes through the upper body and lower body and all over the place. This is the heart pumping blood around. If you take a look on the circulation, it's going to be something like this, just for you to get the idea. Upper and lower body through the vena cava gets into the heart. The blood flows through the ventricle, from the atrium to the ventricle, from the ventricle to the pulmonary artery to the lungs. It's oxygenated, it comes back to the pulmonary vein, gets into the left atrium, that goes to the left ventricle and is pumped to the aorta, to the upper and the lower body. This is the body circulation. And as you can see here, you have actually two circulations. You have a large circulation, which involves the upper and lower body, and we have a small circulation, which involves the lungs. The part of the heart that pumps blood to the lungs, the small circulation, which is a small trajectory, just this, it's the right side. Therefore, the right side is weaker than the right side, than the left side. The left side pumps blood through all over the body, so it's a much stronger side. The left ventricle is much stronger than the right ventricle, okay? By the way, here you have deoxygenated blood in blue. Actually, in real life, it's a very dark red or purple. It's the one that you know when you go collecting blood. This is going to be with the O2 all used up, full of carbon dioxide, is going to be there before the lungs. And oxygenated, which in real life is very bright red. Usually you don't see this kind of blood, because usually you don't collect blood from this kind of place, is going to be oxygenated. So it's after the lungs, it got rid of the carbon dioxide, it's full of oxygen, and is going to be moved to the body tissues to oxygenate all the blood, the body tissues all over the body. Okay, so if you see it from outside, you see that the heart is a muscle, and as it's a muscle, it also needs to consume oxygen and glucose and nutrients in order to pump. The heart receives blood, which makes us think that they wouldn't need to have their own blood vessels, but they do, because the blood passes through the inside of the heart, which sometimes is very far away from many cells. Remember that diffusion is very efficient up to 1 millimeter, but the heart muscles are thicker than that, so the blood getting through the atrium and the ventricle wouldn't be able to diffuse oxygen and glucose and stuff to the tissues. And in addition, the right side of the heart receives deoxygenated blood, which wouldn't be enough oxygen to be able to fuel the muscle of the heart. So because of that, the heart has its own blood supply. Okay, it has its own blood vessel. So blood is going to be leaving the aorta through a coronary artery. So the coronary, the artery of the heart, it leaves the aorta and it supplies the heart muscle. So here we have no coronary arteries going all over the place. There's another one over here. This here is coronary artery. This here is going to be irrigating the heart with oxygen and glucose. By the way, if one of those gets clot, if one of those gets with a block over there, everything else after that part usually die. This is what you call a heart attack, which causes a cardiac infarction. So that's why I have to be very careful with our coronary arteries, because they are very prone for clotting. We don't know exactly why, but they are very prone for being clot and being blocked with fat and damage and other kind of stuff. So we have to be very careful with that stuff. The coronary veins, let me draw them here now in green for you. The coronary veins are this one in blue here. They get the blood from the heart and they move it back to the vena cava to make it go back there and to be oxygenated again. So the heart has its own blood system. Just for you to realize, we're going to be talking more about this in class, but it's something for you to start thinking about the opening and closing of valves. So when the heart is relaxed and it's being filled with blood, here you have blood being filled in, the semilunar valves are closed because the pressures in the artery are very big and the blood now is pushing these valves closed and the blood is not flowing back into the heart. And then the heart is being filled with blood coming through the vena cava and through the pulmonary vein is coming from the veins. In the moment that the atrium pumps, the atrium starts pumping fast, it gives a final push into the ventricles, and then the atrioventricular valves, they are both still open. But in the moment that the ventricle contracts, the atrioventricular valves, the mitral, the tricuspid here and the mitral over there, they close, so the blood don't flow back to the veins or to the atrium, and then the blood flows through the arteries, the pulmonary artery over there and the aorta over here. And then the heart relaxes again, the semilunar valves close again, and the blood flows through the vena cava, pulmonary vein, through the atrium, the atria, and then it goes into the ventricle to start the cycle again. Okay, so here, just to illustrate to you, the blood is going passively here first from the atria to the ventricles, and then the atria contract and gives a final push of blood into the ventricles. Then the ventricles contract and close the atrioventricular valve, and the blood flows then here, the blood flows through the arteries, opening the semilunar valve. And in the moment it relaxes again, the semilunar valves close and the blood don't flow back to the ventricle, the blood flows from the veins to the atria to the ventricles. Okay. One interesting take, we are going to see this a little bit with more care in class, is what happens to the pressure in the atria, in the ventricle, and in the arteries of the heart during the heart cycle of contraction. Okay, so basically, let's start talk about the atria, which is kind of simple. The atria contracts in the very beginning of the heart contraction over there. The pressure increases, but the blood flows to the ventricle, and then after that, the pressure even increases a little bit when the ventricle contracts because of all those tissues are kind of flexible, and the atria end up getting a little bit of pressure over there, but not much pressure anyway, and then it goes over there. The most important thing here is that this is the moment that the atrium have been contracting and pushing blood to the ventricle. Okay, so this is the atrial contraction. Let's take a look now on the left ventricle contraction. So the atrium have contracted, the ventricle pressure has increased a little bit as well because the atrium is pushing blood into the ventricle. And in that moment, the atrium is going to be receiving pressure over there, but because the ventricle is contracting. And when the ventricle contracts, the blood pressure increases a lot. The pressure in the left ventricle goes from almost zero, a little bit above zero because the atrium has just contracted there, to up to 120 millimeters of mercury. So that's a very big increase in the pressure inside of the ventricle. And then after that, the ventricle starts relaxing, and then it reaches the same pressure of the atria, and in that moment, the atrioventricular valves open again, and then the ventricles are filled with blood again to start a new cycle. So this here is the pressure cycle of the ventricle. And now let's put together here the pulmonary, no, not the pulmonary, sorry, I'll put the aorta here. Let's put the aorta here, the aorta artery. So the ventricle has contracted, the atrium has contracted, and the aorta has a pressure of about 80 millimeters of mercury. That's the lowest pressure that the aorta, the arteries, they get in the very end of the cycle of the contraction, in the beginning of the cycle while the ventricle didn't contract yet. When the ventricle contracts like that, the pressure on the ventricle, while it's still smaller than the pressure of the artery, the semilunar valves are closed. But in the moment it passes, at this point over here, in the moment that the pressure on the ventricle is bigger than the pressure of the artery, then the semilunar valves open and the blood flows through the artery and the pressure of the artery increases. It goes up to 120. And then the pressure starts reducing a little bit, but after a certain while, it's reduced a little bit, but in the ventricle it drops because the ventricle is totally relaxing, but the pressure of the artery will make the blood to try to flow back to the ventricle, closing the semilunar valve. So the pressure of the artery, it stays high. It stays there above 80, 100, close to 120. And then from that moment on, the ventricles got relaxed, filled up with blood, and the artery keeps a high blood pressure, reducing a little bit because the blood is moving toward the tissue, so it's reduced a little bit all the way to the next cycle in the moment that it pumps. So just for you to see all this in terms of volume, here we have the volume of the left ventricle. So basically we have the left ventricle is being completely filled here. This is 120 cubic centimeters, which is 120 milliliters. So the atria has just pumped a little bit of blood into the ventricle, so the ventricle is almost totally full over there. Then the ventricle is contracting, but all the way to this point over here, the semilunar valves are closed. The atrioventricular valves are also closed over here. So basically the volume is not changing. But in the moment that the pressure gets bigger than the pressure of the artery, the semilunar valves open and the volume reduces, goes from 120 milliliters to almost 40 milliliters, 50 milliliters. So the ventricle gets kind of empty by squeezing the blood out into the artery. And then the ventricle relax, but now it's just relaxed, it's losing the pressure. The blood now is all there in the artery, and then the ventricle starts being filled again passively, in a while here, with the heart that's relaxed and now being filled up with blood, waiting for the moment of the final push that the atrium is going to contract and start a new cycle again. Very important here, looking at all these pressures, is to bear in mind what's going on with the heart in terms of contraction, atrium contracting, ventricle contracting, and valves. Atrioventricular valves, the tricuspids and bicuspids open or closed, and the semilunar valves open or closed. So that's what you have to bear in mind, and we're going to be talking more about that in class. Okay. This diagram here might help us to discuss later, including the electrical signal here and the sounds that the heart's going to be making, but we'll talk more about that in class. I hope you have fun. Do a little quiz now, and I'll see you in class.